Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King bonus podcast. I have with me today a returning guest. You might remember him from episode 11, and that would be writer Bruce Solheim. Hi, Bruce. How are you doing?
Okay. How are you doing, Lou?
Well, these are unique times. We're right in the early days of the coronavirus social isolation or social distancing.
Yes.
So I assume that you're weathering the storm all right so far?
Yeah, we're in lockdown in California. So yeah, we're at home, but it's a good time to get some writing done and other things done. So you try to make the best of the situation.
That's correct. Absolutely. And I hope for all our listeners out there that they've managed to find something to occupy their time with as well. And hopefully this podcast might be a small part of that.
Yeah,
helping along of getting through this experience. And it's really uncharted territory because we have no idea how long it's going to last. I've heard some people say a year, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's turn to what we have you on for today, Bruce. And that is to talk about your latest book in your Trinity series, or Timeless series, I'm sorry. And that is your newest book, Timeless Trinity. But before we get into that, why don't you just set up yourself a little bit to give a little bit of your background for viewers who didn't hear the interview that we did last April, and just tell us who you are, where you are, and what you're all about.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Lou. Yeah, my name is Bruce Solheim, and I'm a professor of history at Citrus College in Southern California. I've been teaching there for 22 years. And I'm teaching at the college level for 28 years. So I've been around a while. And I've published 9 books. The last 3 have been paranormal books. I've written 10 plays, and 2 of them have been produced. I've also published a comic book. And I served 6 years in the U.S. Army. I was a Fulbright professor and scholar in 2003. So I got all these academic credentials and 6 academic books that I published before the Timeless books.
Right.
And these 3 last books is quite a departure for me. So I had a pretty standard academic teaching career, publishing career until 2016 when I decided that I was going to start writing about my paranormal experiences. Now I'd had paranormal experiences my whole life, so that was nothing new to me. But what was new to me was publishing and writing about it and exposing this hidden history, if you will, publicly. So that's why I'm here. And yeah, so that's just a little snapshot.
Okay. So let's talk about your Timeless series then. Maybe you can set that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah. So the Timeless series, Timeless Deja Vu, and Timeless Trinity, the latest one, document 89 different paranormal events that have happened in my life. There have been more than 89, but those are the 89 I've written about. And the series kind of starts off with the more standard paranormal stuff, ghost stories and demonic stuff and angels and telepathy and telekinesis. And then I've introduced in the second book a little bit more of the framework, as I understand it, the theoretical framework of what's going on. And I included a extraterrestrial story in there. And then this latest book, Timeless Trinity, of the 24 paranormal stories, 9 of them deal with extraterrestrials, UFOs, or non-human intelligence, I guess is what some people call it. So I venture a little bit further in each book. I tested the waters with the first one, went a little bit further in the second one, and the third one, as I like to say, I let it all hang out.
Okay. And is this the completion of this series then? Or is there going to be another book after this?
Yeah, I guess since I called it a trilogy, I can't do another Timeless book, but I'm still going to, things keep happening continually. I have contact with who I call an ancient alien mystic named Anzar. So I have continuous contact with him. So I'm going to continue writing. I'm not sure what form it'll take. Right now, I'm doing a blog, if you will,
right?
Daily contact. So, and that'll probably turn into something else. We'll see. And there did this comic book too. So I want to do more of these comic books, which are also extraterrestrial related.
Okay.
So, but with a firm foundation of what I think the theory behind all this is. So I think that's what's probably going to happen. And you never know. Being a writer, you're moved by inspiration and by you're compelled to write about certain things. And certainly what we're going, the trials and tribulations we're going through right now is going to be something that can be written about as well from many different perspectives, I would think, for a lot of writers. So,
right.
yeah, who knows what we're going to do next. I've written plays too. I'm not saying that I won't write another play. So we'll see what happens with all this. Maybe it'll all converge into one big giant project, multimedia project. Who knows?
Right. Okay, so let's put this series in context. And I know you talked about this a little bit or in your previous interview with us, but again, for people that didn't hear that one, can you tell us how this paranormal part of your life, where this first started to take place and how it's manifested itself over the years to the point where you've come up with the ability or experiences to so far write at least 3 books about it?
Yeah. Well, it started at age 4 in northern Norway on an island, a remote island 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. That's where my parents are from. I was born in Seattle, Washington, but my parents are from that island. We were visiting my grandmother, and I got very sick. I mean, very, very sick. And the problem is that it was such a remote island. And this is in 1962, mind you. And it was in the wintertime. There's no hospital there. So you pretty much have to, shelter in place, as we would use today's terminology. And my relatives came over, and I was so sick. I couldn't move my head. My neck was completely stiff. I had a high fever, chills, shivering, body aches. And relatives came over and said, this is what happened to my uncle when he got polio. This is what happened to your brother when he got sick and died the next day. So all this really scary stuff. And as a little kid, even you understand that this is terrible. And I remember crying. I was so upset. And I was in this little bed in my grandmother's kitchen because she had a bad leg and she couldn't get up and down the steps all the time. So oftentimes she would take naps in the kitchen in this little bed. So I was in that little bed and I fell into this really uncomfortable sleep, and people left the kitchen. And when I woke up, there was this bright light above me in the ceiling of the kitchen, and it was very warm. And it was very comforting. It was like everything bad was going to go away. I didn't have to worry about anything. I stopped crying. I felt, like everything was going to be okay. And I fell back to sleep. And when I woke up the next morning, early in the morning, I was completely fine. I was completely healed. There were no fever, nothing, no body aches. I could move my head side to side. I was up and at 'em, ready to go. Right. And my mom and my grandmother said it was a miracle and that it was my guardian angel that had intervened and saved me. For what purpose, I don't know. But I believe because I remembered this light and how it was a healing light. And so I believed them, it's my guardian angel. And from that point on, it was not just a matter of belief, it was experience, because things started to happen. From that point on, age 6, age 8, just throughout my life and until today, things still happen. And I think that opening experience kind of opened the doors to this other dimension, or the spirit world. So I think that was what started it. And then things happened frequently, but randomly. I didn't seem to have any control over anything. It just would happen. And I would note the experience. Oftentimes I would journal about it and keep track of it, or I would just remember it. And so that's what led me up till 2016. So all this was going on just randomly and frequently. I always meant to do something with it, but I didn't know quite what to do with it. I even took a paranormal course when I was stationed in Germany in the U.S. Army. Fascinating. I got to know academically what was going on, but I still didn't have the time to really get into it totally. In 2016, my dear friend died, Gene Thorkelson, also Norwegian American. I grew up with him in Seattle from when we were little kids, and he died suddenly in 2016. And a month after he died, he came to me in a vision, which I have pretty frequently, where we were talking to each other just like you and I are talking, except I see him too. He told me what it was like to be in the afterlife, and he said that you have a mission, and it is to tell your stories. Now's the time to tell your stories. And I was afraid to do so because as an academic, I knew that I ran a big risk, that I could be, somebody would think I was a lunatic, and they would retire me early, and my students would ridicule me, my colleagues would abandon me, or even my family would think I was nuts, So, all these things I thought could happen. Gene said, don't worry about that. It'll be okay. I'll help guide you. And he even gave me the name of the book, Timeless. And so that became the name for my trilogy of timeless books. He was right. People did not turn away from me. My colleagues were very supportive. And the administration allowed me to teach a paranormal course because I thought if I can write the book and get away with it, why maybe I could teach a course too.
Right.
And really explore all this and learn more. And which I have for the last year and a half. I've been teaching a paranormal personal history course at Citrus College. And it's been nothing but good, reviews pretty much, and students support it, faculty support it. Obviously, the administration supports it. Otherwise, they wouldn't let me teach the course.
Right.
So it's really been very good and very rewarding. And I feel like I am doing something very good. I know I'm doing something very good because people come up to me and they think I am a safe resource for them to tell their stories. And when they take the course, that's the main reason they take it, is not to get wisdom from me, but to have a safe place tell their story.
Right.
And and I help them put it into some kind of theoretical context or framework so it makes sense to them instead of just something random that doesn't make sense. So that's really what's been going on since 2016. So I and that continues to this day.
Okay. And obviously it seems to have all your experiences seem to have been predicated on what I guess you would call a near-death experience that you just described when you were young.
Yeah.
And was this ability that you have, is this something that runs in your family? I can't remember.
Yeah. My mom was very psychic. She wasn't a professional psychic. We would do things like read playing cards, try to guess the card, using telepathy. And we would do it at home, or we'd do it on camping trips, just me and my mom and my dad. And my dad was not a believer. He was very skeptical and he was very uncomfortable with it. So my mom and I would do it for a while. We'd get really good hit rate, much greater than chance. And then my dad would shut it down. He said, "That's nonsense. Now stop it." And he didn't like it. He was a immigrant, carpenter, blue collar, no nonsense kind of guy. And he didn't like it. I think it made him uncomfortable.
Right.
But my mom would always wink at me, and we always listened to my dad, but she'd wink at me and smile. And I knew that she knew that I knew, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And how do you experience these? I don't know what you want to call them, visions or experiences. Are you asleep? I think you said something about you go on walks and you kind of go on a fugue state.
There's different ways. The way I've learned to, I never say control it, I say manage it. So when I go on almost daily, what I call spirit walks in a special location here near my home, it's a total of about 3 miles total, but part of it is very powerful. There's this this old wash that goes up into the mountains, and there's a sidewalk or a road that goes straight up into the mountains. I think I know it's an old Indian trail of some sort. And at the base of this road is a Freemason temple, a Masonic temple. Now, I think we all know that the Freemasons don't just put their temples anywhere. They put them in magical places because they do a lot of ritual magic, and they pick those locations carefully. So it's a very powerful place where the separation between the world that we're in right now and the spirit world is very thin. And so that's where I make most of my connections on that spirit walk. I speak with those that have passed away. I speak with alien entities like this Anzar character I told you about. And that's where I make that communication. And I do it for mainly for myself to get insights, but also when people ask me, like I just had a request, when I do my spirit walk today, a request from a couple of people that would like me to contact those that have passed on. And I always I never take money for it. I do it just for friends and family and people who ask me, who I think are good people, and I will make these connections. And oftentimes I do find out information that they're looking for, information that I couldn't get otherwise because I haven't met the people that they want me to talk to.
Right.
How the whole process works, I'm not really sure. I think it's that I am able to make that connection. I think they recognize that I am available to them when I call out their name. And the way I look at it, it's kind of like a big radar dish above my head. And they see people walking around. The people in the spirit world see people. They see us, right? And they see some people have this ability. So that's who they go to. They'll go and say, okay, I can talk to this person, because they'll try to talk to other people and they don't hear it. They don't make the connection.
Right.
Whitley Strieber, in his latest book, A New World, I think it's called, says that it's a glow, that there's a glow about you, and extraterrestrials, people in the spirit world, those that have passed on, they see this glow about your head or about you, and they realize that's a person I can try to get a message to. And I don't think I don't want to make it sound to your listeners like, oh, I think I'm so great or so special. It's just something that I think everybody has. I just have been able to develop it from a very young age, and there's a little bit of hereditary being passed on there. So I think it's just like anything else. Everybody, I like to use a baseball analogy. Everybody can throw a ball, but some people can throw it 90 miles an hour. There's and you either through natural talent or developing it. And I think it's probably a little bit of both. So I don't see it as something that I'm special. It just I have a special mission. The mission is what's important. I'm not important. The mission is important. I just happen to be the vessel by which this is taking place.
Okay.
It's a very important, very humbling experience, actually, because you realize that you don't really totally understand why this is happening. You provide comfort and aid to people who want information, and like I said, there's some people that take money for doing it, and I don't think that's terrible necessarily if that's their only way to make a living and they're legitimate.
Okay.
There are false people, that just take people's money. I don't take any money because I have a good job. I don't need extra money necessarily, so I just do it out of a sense of mission. But anyway, that's how it happens. So it's the process is really the best way it's been described to me by those in the spirit world is focused, calm. You're calm. And you're in an alpha, probably the scientists would call it alpha brainwave state. And I am focused on the intention of making the connection, but I'm yet calm at the same time. And that's when it comes. And it can come in a voice kind of thing. It can come in symbolic images. It could come in a form of handwriting, script handwriting, or whatever you call it, cursive handwriting. I sometimes see that answers to my questions. Okay. Which is odd because I don't write cursive. I'm a block printer. I've never been able to write cursive. So I know it's not me that's doing it. Anyway, so that's the process. And I still have other things that come to me, like in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and hear like a message. Like last night, I woke up and it was a very clear voice in my head that said cognitive dissonance. And I thought, why is that in my head? And then I looked it up just because I kind of knew what it was. But this idea that you have like 2 or 3 different conflicting ideas or beliefs at the same time, and it causes a psychological condition of confusion and great distress. And I thought, man, that's a good example of what's going on right now. Right. So that came to my head. I didn't go to bed reading a psychological journal or anything. I get these messages like that. Sometimes sometimes it's words, sometimes it's an image, but it was words last night.
Well, that's good. I was afraid that you were thinking maybe of this interview that you were going to do with
me. No. My wife, I think I talked about her last time, Ginger. She's very agnostic about this whole thing. She's a very practical person. I think she's a very intuitive person, more than I think she even knows. But so I always am very grounded because I tell her these remarkable things. Yeah, I spoke to this person who's passed on. She goes, "Oh, that's great. Can you help me make the bed now? Can you, do this?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm her partner and we work together and, in our life. So I can't be, it's probably a good thing I'm not married to a psychic. Then you'd never get out of that realm. It's like you could never get yourself grounded. I think it's very important to be grounded."
Yes, that's, I think that's quite true. So that's the yin and yang thing going on there. So I have a couple of questions based on just what you went through there. So there's rapid fire questions. Yeah. Before you did these walks, how were you experiencing these glimpses, paranormal glimpses? Was it because you weren't walking all the time, right?
No, this is just randomly, frequently and randomly, just because I didn't know when I was bringing the radar dish up and when it was down. I didn't know how to turn it on and turn it off. It's just as important to learn how to turn it off so you can sleep, so you can concentrate on other things. Because you don't want to have some big vision while you're in a staff meeting or something. That's not good time.
Did that ever happen? Or like when you were in school, people thought you were zoning out or not paying attention to classes? Or
Exactly, where people would like snap their fingers. Hello, is anybody in there? Right. So you got to be. So I didn't know how that you could somehow manage that. Or I avoid the word control because I think it assumes too much. I think manage is a better word. And when you learn how to manage it, you can sleep better, you can keep grounded. And then when it's time, you can say, okay, spirits, I know you want to talk. Now, it's very important that you also protect yourself when you have these engagements. You don't want to just open yourself up to the universe and then everything pours in, all these, because there's a lot of negative stuff out there and you don't want that. So
you can get that off the internet, but
exactly. There's plenty of that. in this world.
Has your ability, has it peaked at a certain age, or is it stayed constant for you, or like you're older now, or do you find that this not as easily accessible as it used to be, or how's that going for you?
I think it evolves. I don't have the deja vu experiences as much as I used to when I was younger. And from what I've read, that's fairly common with people.
Right.
But I think I'm wiser now and able to manage these things so I can get clearer answers and understand and trust myself rather than just think, oh, that was something freaky, I better not talk about that. Now it's like, well, let me put it into perspective based on 61 years or whatever. I'm 61 now. All this experience, this makes sense. And this maybe is signal noise that is my own conscience trying to bring something in there. And you got to separate that out and the wheat from the chaff, right?
Right.
So I think that's what you learn. But raw talent wise, I think you probably peak when you're younger, but unfortunately I didn't have the skills to manage it.
Right.
So, but I think you substitute that with wisdom like we do in this world too. Maybe you don't have the peak IQ that you had when you just took your calculus class at age 22, but you have practical experience and wisdom now to make up for it.
Right. And have you ever been approached by the police to help in an investigation?
I have not. I haven't put myself out there like that. I have had students in my class who have done that and people I've interviewed who have done that. And it is a very rewarding thing, especially when it involves like missing children or missing loved ones. So I wouldn't be adverse to doing that. Right now, that doesn't seem to be my mission. Because I'm a writer, I think my mission is to get books out there, get the experiences out there, teach this class. But certainly if somebody was to approach me and say, can you help us? Oh, of course I would help them, because then I would realize that's the universe telling me that I need to move into a different approach to maybe trying to help. And I have never tried it. So it'd be interesting to see how I would do.
You've never had any sort of paranormal experiences about somebody in distress being lost or missing, or?
Well, I have had a connection, and this just came randomly, but you remember when that journalist Khashoggi was killed or went missing?
Yep.
Yeah. And in Turkey, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody suspects that the Saudi government had something to do with it, and particularly the prince or crown prince or whatever. I had a connection with someone who claimed to be Khashoggi, and he gave me detailed information on where he was dumped. And I looked at a map and where they were in Turkey, and it was in what is it? Either the Bosphorus or one of the waterway there in Istanbul, where the Dardanelles, whatever that connection is between the Middle East and Europe, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And there was a holy site near there, like a mosque near there. So I didn't share that information with anybody because I thought, who am I going to tell and who's going to believe me? Nobody asked me to give this information. So I've never been asked, but I did receive some information, and this was before any of this other information came out, that he told me that, that he had been stabbed and choked and cut up and everything else. So that was horrible. It was horrible information to get, but who was I going to tell? And then if I start telling people, even if they do believe me, they're going to say, well, what do you have to do with it? I've heard of psychic mediums who offer information without being asked, and all of a sudden they're a suspect.
Right.
Because how would you know that? Mm-hmm. How could you know that? And next thing you know, you're incarcerated while they're investigating. And I thought, well, nobody's asking me. Information started to come out anyway, and it became pretty obvious that the Saudis were behind it. But so anyway, that's the closest I've ever come to something like that.
Oh, okay.
And I just kind of stumbled into it, maybe because I was thinking about it a lot.
Maybe. Okay.
That this is terrible that this journalist was murdered.
Yes.
So
yeah. Okay. And probably the most important question, because you've mentioned it several times now, is your mission.
Yeah.
And you keep talking about writing and teaching, but what's the goal of this mission?
The goal is to have people realize that they have talents that they don't even that are not aware of. And the first thing I point out to people is, have you ever felt like you had the feeling that somebody was staring at you, and then you turn around and sure enough, somebody was staring at you? That is a psychic talent that all of us have. It's a survival skill, actually. But in the modern world, we have so much signal noise going on and so many things going on. We don't have those quiet places where we can trust our intuition and trust those instincts. In the ancient world, people absolutely needed them, and they cultivated and harness those skills that we now think are a lot of people think are superstition or whatever.
Right.
But those are natural innate abilities that people have, gut instincts. Like you hear a lot of times, mothers, when they know their children are in distress, even if they're far away, they'll hear their voice. So I think all of us have it. All of us have it, but we either dismiss it or think that it's just coincidence or whatever. And so the mission I have is that, no, it's real. And it can be a lot of it's been tested in laboratories. So support people like Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who's studying all these things and showing it under laboratory conditions that it does exist, and trying to cut through the debunkers, the professional debunkers who say it's not real, and trust your own instincts. And also this idea that there is something beyond death, that we shouldn't be afraid. This fear of death is what motivates a lot of people's bad behavior.
Right.
They get irrational about it. I mean, we see that going on right now. People are just being irrational and they need to calm down and focus.
Yeah. And stop hoarding toilet paper.
Exactly. And food, I hear this, the elders are not able to get basic foods because they're not fast enough and quick enough to get in there and get in those.
Yeah.
So it's just sad. We need to help each other and trust our instincts and operate from a position of love. That's right. These are the messages that I'm getting, and I think that's important that I put it out there to trust yourselves. And as I say, put in the mouth of my comic book character, Snark, be the light. Be the light. This idea that, and it has so many different variations of meaning, but this idea that there's light and dark in the universe, in the world.
Right.
And we want to be on the side of light and help people. And as one lady that I spoke to, and I was asked to try to reach her beyond death, and she had been a nurse in life, and she told me, the main purpose for us, for people in reality or on this earth, is to help alleviate the suffering of others. That's it.
Right.
It's it comes down to that. That's be the light, right? So I guess that's the ultimate message of what's going on.
And that's a great message. And I don't know if you saw or read, just to bring the Stephen King slant into this, the Dr. Sleep book, or saw the movie, but there's a whole subplot in there of where Danny's working at a hospice for dying patients. And there's that whole exploration of what happens to people after they die. And that movie really gave me like a good feeling, an optimism about people in general. And that like Danny says to Abra, to shine on, which is basically what you just said. Yeah.
It keeps coming back again and again. It's said different ways, but it's the same message. And I have not seen that movie. I would like to. That sounds great.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah.
You might,
yeah.
I imagine somebody in your position might have a special empathy for the characters in that.
Yeah.
Or Johnny Smith from the Dead Zone too, maybe.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm seeing here in the book description that there's a foreword by a world-renowned hypnotherapist, Yvonne Smith.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that's about?
Yeah, Yvonne, a friend of mine, Terry Lovelace, he's a person who was abducted. He was in the Air Force in 1977. Him and his friend at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas were abducted, both of them together. So it was a companion abduction.
That's an ominous name.
Yeah, Devil's Den. Yeah, never go to the place with an ominous name. That's probably rule one, right? But you're just asking for trouble. But anyway, so he held this inside all this time. And then he discovered that he had an implant, and he had gone to a doctor about some other condition, and they found out he had this strange device in his knee. So then he decided to come out with the story, what had happened, because he had kind of hidden it. He had recommended, so his book is called Incident at Devil's Den, which is a great read. It's a great book, and he's a really nice guy. Lives in Dallas now, but anyway, he's a good friend of mine. So he recommended, he was afraid to do it, but he said, Yvonne, I've heard Yvonne is great, and she lives near you here in Southern California. So I said, really? Yeah, I've always wanted to explore further some of these experiences I've had, because I think there's more to the story, and I just maybe have some blocked memories there.
Right.
And so I got a hold of her, and she did kind of a vetting process, because a lot of people who are mentally disturbed get a hold of her, which is not good for them or for her, since she's not a psychiatrist, right? So I went through the vetting process. I met with her, and I had, I think, 4 or 5 sessions with her, and brought a lot of details out, which helped me in writing this last book, The Timeless Trinity. I write about 9 different experiences, 4 of which are somewhat based on the hypnotherapy sessions that I did with her, retrieved memories. So they're a combination of conscious memory, retrieved memory. And in one case, my incident, and my friend, I'll call him Ernie. That's not his real name, but he told me not to use his real name. We were on a road trip, and we're heading to Salt Lake City and from Seattle.
Okay.
And it was kind of weird. When we took off from Seattle, there was a lot of, I thought they were crows. They might have been ravens, but they were circling the house. I thought there was something weird about that. It just seemed like it's kind of an ominous sign for what was to come. Well, then as we crossed over into eastern Washington over the Cascade Mountains, we got a late start on our trip.
Okay.
And we stopped as we turned off towards Yakima, there was like a viewpoint off the road, like you can Vista viewpoint. It's a beautiful place there. So we stopped there, and I noticed all those crows again, which is not unusual, I guess, to see crows, but it just seemed like everywhere we stopped, there were these crows or ravens or whatever, big black birds. We went back on the freeway, and then we got to Boise, Idaho. And by that time, because we got a late start, it was dark, and I was kind of tired. So my friend Ernie was driving. And he fell asleep at the wheel, and it was a 2-lane highway near Boise, Idaho. And when I woke up suddenly, like somebody woke me up, and I looked, and there was a semi-truck coming right at us. We were in the wrong lane, and there was Ernie, his head to the side, asleep, at the wheel. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed the wheel. I yelled out, "Ernie!" And I grabbed the wheel and turned it just in time. That horn was, blaring. Right. And so we avoided that. And I said, I got really mad at him. And then he got mad at me. And then I said, okay, I'm sorry. Neither one of us should have been driving. We're too tired.
Right.
Let's stop somewhere. So we kept going a little bit until we got to this place called Black Pine Peak. There was supposed to be a campground there. And it's a wilderness area in Idaho. And we started driving on this forest road, and we just kept going and going. We either drove by it, or we never got to it, but whatever, we were too tired. So he said, let's just pull over to the side of the road because there's nobody here.
Right.
There's like a clearing there, but it was dark already, all these trees around us. And we just were too tired to put up a tent. So we just were sleeping in my parents' 1972 Volvo station wagon. And it was cramped. Ernie and I are both big guys. I was in the driver's seat, and the wheel was like poking me in the ribs and a sleeping bag over me, but it just was very uncomfortable. Well, these are conscious memories I'm sharing now. Mm-hmm. There was some weird lights around us, and I felt like there were people around us. And those are some of the conscious memories I have. And there was like this weird sound, like a whooshing sound, a metallic sound, but I was so tired. It's like I couldn't even move. I couldn't really sleep properly, but I kept hearing all this stuff. So those are my conscious memories, that there was something weird going on there, but I was like frozen and unable to do anything about it. That's my conscious memories. Well, I knew something was strange. So I had Yvonne Smith, once again, she comes up. Mm-hmm. We did a hypnotic regression. And as it turned out, there was a lot more to the story.
Right.
I saw the people who I saw around me were alien entities, as it turned out. They were the short grays and a couple of the tall gray classic alien types. Mm-hmm. She said, okay, this is going on. And there's a sound of like a spacecraft. That's the whooshing, the metallic sound. I even remembered the smell. I said, it smells like when it's about to rain, that ionization smell or whatever. It's a very distinctive smell. And she said, because she always asks about all your senses. And then she said, okay, now as you're back there remembering this event, turn to your side. And what is Ernie doing? So in my memory, I'm looking, and I said, Ernie's gone. Mm. He's gone. Why is he gone? Mm. That's strange. Where is he in the middle of the night? Why is he gone?
Right.
So so at that point, I knew that something terrible was happening, and then I retrieved a memory of getting out. Eventually, I was unfrozen or unparalyzed and able to get out of the car, and I was able to go onto the dirt road there, the forest road.
Okay.
And there was this little entity there that had a kind of a reptilian look to him, this kind of lizard look to him. And he had like something that looked like a clipboard. So, which was weird, it's a very weird thing. And then, so that is basically all I could retrieve. And at that point I decided I'm going to ask Ernie And I hadn't talked to him in probably a couple of years.
All right.
So I emailed him and I said, "Hey, Ernie, you remember that trip we took?" He said, Yeah, I remember. And we were exchanging emails. And I even called him on the phone too about it after we started the emailing. I said, "What do you remember about it?" And he said he remembered the truck horn. He remembered almost crashing. He remembered the weird, how we never got to the campground. And he remembered that the lights, and the weird lights, all that stuff. And then I told him, "Well, Ernie, I did this hypnotic regression and I wrote a story about it. Would you like to read it?" And he said, "Sure." So I wrote up the story based on my retrieved memories and my conscious memories and his recollections. And I sent it to him. And he wrote me back and was furious. Oh my gosh, was he furious. He said, "If you're going to publish this, do not use my name at all. And I think this is a dirty trick that you brought this up and didn't tell me right away that you suspected it was a UFO alien abduction kind of thing."
Right.
And I said, "Ernie, I wasn't trying to trick you. I was just trying to figure it out systematically, what's going on. And I didn't want to plant ideas in your head, but he would have none of it. And he was very upset. And then he wrote me back this very odd email where he said, "Maybe I should write my own book about this experience, but probably wouldn't do any good because you'll probably publish yours first." And I had said in one of the emails that I felt bad about this whole thing, that I felt that I think he had been abducted and somehow I was unable to stop it.
Right.
And he said, "Maybe the reason you feel bad is because you allowed your friend to be abducted by these alien creatures." And he says, "And I do remember something." And then he ended the email. He said, "I remember something. I remember voices saying, 'Wow, this one's a squealer.' You think he'd never seen pincers before, And I thought, that's an odd thing. And I didn't know if he was kidding and might trying to make fun of me or if he was serious. And I tried to contact him again. And then he has not, to this day, this is like 9 months ago. I wrote this story, I think it was 9 months ago.
All right.
He will not contact me. And I'll even try to contact him about like something like baseball or something, sports or something. No, he will not. He has cut me off. And I talked to Yvonne about it. She said, that's very common. If you have a dual experience, one of them will probably, if they remember it, the other one will probably not, and try to and their relationship will dissolve. Sometimes husband and wife too, boyfriend and girlfriend. This has happened and friends. And then to add kind of a end to this story, I remember writing a poem about this experience, and I dug through. I collected all my short stories, poems, journals since I was in the 70s, and I found a poem that I call "Visitors," and it's dated 1977, and it's about alien abduction. And at the bottom of the poem, it says something like, "I sold out to the aliens. I'm sorry." And it mentions pincers. And I thought, oh my God, here's like a document from 1977 that kind of provides somewhat of a validation for what he had mentioned, because he randomly, I thought, mentioned pincers. But in that poem, I mentioned it. And poetry, of course, when you write poetry, a lot of times that's your subconscious bubbling up in a very unique type of language, very different than prose. Right. At least in my experience, but I think probably other people who write poetry. And so that kind of, and I still haven't heard from him to this day. Now the book's published, and I don't know if he's going to, get really mad at me. But I changed the name and some of the circumstances. Right. So, but anyway, that's what happened to me. And Black Pine Peak, if you look it up, Black Pine Peak, Idaho, is a very spooky looking place. It's a real wilderness. There's desolate place. It just looks like a place where an abduction would take place.
And again, an ominous name,
Black Pine Peak. That sounds pretty. Yeah, it's not like Lollipops and Rainbows Peak.
No. So these aliens had nothing to do with the one that you've had continual contact, Anzar, who I believe is that the illustration on the cover, a representation of Anzar?
Actually, that's a female reptilian that came to me in a dream, and
okay.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. But yeah, she's a very ominous creature. Yeah, Anzar's who I've traced it back to an experience when I was 6 years old, which is a whole kind of long story, and we don't really have time to go into it. But sure. I've had contact with him in different forms since 1964. Okay. And it's recently that I have reconnected to him. And I did have an incident in 1997 where he came to me as somebody, he called himself the progenitor. And he said that he was the original contact for humans on Earth, which is pretty cool, So
Sure.
And that's when he started the contact, but I wasn't ready to tell the story yet. And then about a year and a half ago, I made contact with him, and that's when I learned what his real name was. And since then, I've had frequent contact with him, and he's helped me. Like, for instance, a year ago, I'm not really into predictions or anything because, I think that's a difficult business to be in.
Mm-hmm.
But a year ago, he did tell me that there's going to be a series of calamities and we need to be ready and be prepared. So I did things like I went out and bought like a 50-pound bag of rice and stowed it away. And my wife said, "Oh my God, where are we going to put this? This is, just a bother." And I said, "I'm going to go get a generator." And she said, "Oh no, we're going to put that." So
mm-hmm.
I was already preparing. I'm not like totally prepping or like a prepper or whatever, but still I took what he said to be true, that there is something. And so recently I've asked him, I said, "Is this one of the calamities?" This was early on when it was not as bad as it is now. It seems to get multiplied geometrically every day. He said, "Yeah, this is the first of 7.
Mm.
I thought, "Oh no, first of 7.
Wow.
And I think the second one might be the financial thing. And who knows what's after that. He oftentimes doesn't tell me all the details. He always says this, he said, which I think is important. Predictions are often wrong, but preparations are never wrong. So being prepared is never wrong. Like when you're a Boy Scout or a Cub Scout, be prepared, right?
All right. Well, we could obviously go on for hours, but
there's 89 stories, Lou. I know.
Yeah. So if you go to Amazon, you can see the Timeless Trinity book by Bruce Olav Solheim. And the description there, you talk about Anzar, alien mystics, UFO sightings, alien abductions, and so forth. American mass murderer D.H.H. Holmes.
Yeah. Scary story.
Yeah. And so hopefully this description will whet readers' appetites to check your book out.
Yeah.
And I assume that there's going to be probably another volume down the road if you're still experiencing these paranormal experiences. So
it'll come out in a different way, probably a new series or something, but it'll deal with the same kind of stuff. Yes. I think so.
And so while we still have you, just briefly, you wanted to mention that you also had a comic book series that you've mentioned as well.
Yeah, it's called Snark, SNARC, and it's available on Comixology, which is the biggest digital comic, I guess, distributor nowadays. And part of Amazon, of course, Amazon controls everything. But anyway, so it's 37 years in the making. In 1982, I had a vision, once again, of this half human character who comes to Earth with this. He has kind of a lizard-like appearance, only he's human, but he has a lizard's comb, on his head. And he is on Earth and he's trying to learn about us. And I turned it into a comic strip when I was in engineering school at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana.
Okay.
And it was a very popular comic strip. Drew it myself and wrote it. And then because I was spending so much time writing and illustrating in my comic strip, I dropped out of engineering school and ended up back in the Army. So life took over and I put it aside, and I didn't really, it was always in the back of my mind to want to do a comic book based on this character, but it wasn't until January of 2019 that my second oldest son, who is an engineer, by the way, has a 3D printer and surprised me by taking the Snark character. He had a copy of the original comic strip and he made a 3D bust of the character and he gave it to me for a late Christmas present. And that inspired me. I go, okay, that's the sign. I got it. That's what writers do. Something happens. You go, this is it. The light goes on and you got to do it. So I said, I'm going to do this comic book. So I'd already been working with an artist from Cleveland named Gary Dumm, and he had illustrated my textbook and the Timeless stuff that I was doing, which he does great illustrations, by the way. But anyway, I said, I'd like to do this comic book, and he was on board from the beginning. And then I hooked up with a guy in Seattle named George Varangos as the editor, and then Gary's wife, Laura. And we put this thing out, and it came out, I think it was in November of last year. And 5 different adventures of Snark. And Snark, his mission on Earth is to help prepare us for colonization. But because he's half human, he has a soft spot for us. So as he has these various adventures on Earth, he gets to really realize that he wants to do everything he can to save human culture.
Right.
So he is a good guy, although he has a bad mission. He has to defy his masters, and that That's kind of the setup for the series. So he has, it deals with history. It goes to historical places like Devil's Tower. There's, again, that ominous name, right? And he has an experience there with a Native American, and he goes to the border. So it deals with some hot button issues, but in a way through the eyes of an alien. So there's not any heavy political stuff. It's just, what's going on here? What's going on?
Right.
So, and then there's the human element to it, human interest behind all this, and then his ever-changing mission. And there's humor in there too. He has a sidekick. His cosmic staff is a wisecracking guy, mentor, who has been embodied inside of this cosmic staff. And anyway, so he's the comic relief for all this. So there's comedy, there's serious issues dealt with, there's historical things, there's travel, there's alien life. There's a little bit of everything. It's for ages 9 and above.
All right.
Would be appropriate.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And as you said, that's available on Comixology?
Yes, Comixology, yeah. Yeah, or they can go to my website and get more information on it, bruceolavsolheim.com.
Right. And how many issues are there?
Just the first issue so far. So it's very collectible.
Right.
I actually have printed comics if people want those, and they just need to go to my website and they can figure out how to get if they're a collector,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. I'll put the links up in the show notes for this. And
awesome, Lou. Thank you.
People can go there. You're welcome. And as always, every time I talk to you,
it's an adventure.
It's an adventure, and as people don't know, we had a power failure in the middle of this. And
very ominous.
Yes, but we got back together, so that's good. And it's fascinating stories, and especially for like fans of Stephen King stories.
Yes.
What your experiences are right up our alley. So it's, I want to thank you for taking the time, and
thank you, Lou.
I wish you all the best with your future projects.
And you as well. I love your podcast. So.
Oh, thank you very much. And with that, as always, to the listeners out there, stay safe, but stay scared.